So, as it says, I'm Karl McKeever, the founder and managing director from Futurview. We're a company which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about later, but first off I want to focus on some of the big things which are happening in retail now and in the coming months. So in today's session, let's kind of have a look at where we're at. People, business and shoppers. And specifically, what are the driving forces which are affecting retail brand strategy? Of course, we've all been through a lot in recent months. So what are the trends? What's shaping the now and what's to come? But of course, for everybody that runs a retail business, it's time to take stock. And I don't mean here physically an audit of the inventory. It's about the retail reboot. What do you need to do? What's important? And how do you move forward to build back better? But of course, for businesses everywhere, this is not just about reopening the doors and starting again. It's about adding value and it's about creating value. Value that's actually been lost over the last couple of years, and for many businesses having to get back into the black. Therefore, adding and creating values matters more than ever. I'm going to start the session by looking back, actually. 2 years ago, towards the end of December, I got together with one of my other businesses, the Retail Exchange, and we brought about 15 people into the room. You can see here the chairman of World Retail Congress, Ian McGarrigle, and a number of very notable people in their own fields, from tech, industry, marketing, product, and all kinds of aspects of the consumer spectrum. We set up what's going to be retail looking like. Some issues here with sound. Hopefully you can stick with me. All good with sound over there? Getting a thumbs up. Great. What would retail be like in 2030? What would be some of those big trends which had taken root? What would be the driving forces retailers would have started to adopt by? From that, we launched a futures report, which was essentially looking for the next 10 years ahead and saying what would be important to retailers at that time. And as it says on the front cover there, it's not just about building connections, but it's also about getting ready for tomorrow's retail model. Now, of course, when that was launched in January 2020, who could have predicted the 2 years which we've just lived through? In fact, across those 32 pages of the report, there was no suggestion at all that we would go into the difficulties that we've just faced. So, of course, it took everybody by surprise. But, of course, we all know that retail, along with every other sector of business, in fact, the globe was plunged, and still is in many areas, plunged into crisis. We've lived through it, we're getting stronger for it, and we're starting to look ahead at what will come thereafter. But we should not forget for one moment the crisis that meant. For months, we've spent our lives looking at slides and data and statistics. In fact, it's become a national obsession. Whether that's checking into the latest reports of vaccinations, deaths, hospitalizations, we've all become addicted to this kind of quite unsettling data. Love it or hate it, it's been a backdrop to everyday life. But of course, that has another effect on us. Whilst we're soaking it in, it's also going deep into our psyche. And whether we recognize it or not, it's starting to have an effect in terms of our own mental health. Business too suffered. We know that the economy ground to a halt. Not just here, but in every economy worldwide. And only now, as we start to take the first tentative steps out of it, can we start to see the real damage which has been done to business, to brands, and ultimately to consumers. Perhaps the real consequence, though, of all of those months of lockdown have actually been on our mental health. Yes, there's been delays to physical health, and we can see that certainly from an NHS perspective, we're looking at the biggest backlog ever in its history. But the softer side to that is something which perhaps is within us all. How the pandemic has actually made us think and feel differently. Isolation of being kept indoors. Sometimes fear of being in relationships which were not healthy for us. a loneliness of being separated from our colleagues and teammates and friends. And of course, all of this has built a sense of anxiety. Now, within us all, there's always a sense of uncertainty of what tomorrow will bring. But the pandemic has accelerated that and made it deeper. Anxiety about our fortunes, about our state of our employment, about our family and friends, our children's education. We now are experiencing anxiety at multiple levels. But I think it's really important at this time that we now really start to look at the other side of what the trend data is telling us. Consumers want to feel optimistic. We have this surging and latent feel within us that we're looking for a better tomorrow. Of course, as we in the UK and many other countries, you only have to look at the sort of Scandinavian region, Denmark first, Sweden, Norway, Finland, all coming out this week, are now removing all of the restrictions which have got in the way of everyday normal life. And as we stand here on the 6th of February, in the UK we can see a landscape and environment which is tracking positively forward. We have fewer restrictions now than at any point within the last 18 months, and we're all now starting to feel much more confident and optimistic about what we plan to do next with our lives. Now, this, for me, is the closest I've been to an airport in the last 18 months. My last trip was to Chile in February 2020, and I came back just as the country went into lockdown. Now, I'm optimistically looking forward to getting away, hopefully, to Spain later this week on my first trip. But of course, for all of us, whatever is our own personal view of brightness, whether that's going to football matches, pop concerts, live music, just meeting with friends and family or doing stuff with our children at school, that sense of freedom and that sense of us all looking forward with optimism about getting life back to normal and getting back on with our lives as we once were is palpable within us all. There's an excitement that's bristling within people to want to be back together again, as is evidenced at this very, very successfully attended trade fair on its first day with really strong numbers in terms of visitors. But of course, when you bring all of that together, that fear and anxiety and uncertain feelings that we've had for the last 2 years, but now being eclipsed by that desire for optimism and a brighter future, really you can characterize this by a need for us all to want to feel to lighten up. You can sense this in TV advertising. All of the, we're in it together stories have now been replaced by people which are out there and having fun. The travel industry is encouraging us to want to get back together into resorts, into destinations, and start to enjoy good times. What that means for retailers is that we can start to switch our focus from being locked down and people in a sense of trauma to actually now thinking to be more expressive and more open and ready to re-engage with retail once again. So when we talk about we're talking about across the set, to resume, to reset, to re-engage, and to rebuild. And of course, from a retail perspective, that really means thinking very hard about how we might do business differently. But of course, before we can really get back into that space where we can say it is completely back to normal and that we can move on, there's still some challenges in the system. For months now, we've been having a global supply chain crisis. Very predictable, because of course, when you shut everything down quickly and then you really start to open things back up again, you face surges in demand. But you have ships in the wrong places, and you have container ports which are either open or closed or congested. This image here actually is very representative of where I live. Not far from the East Anglian ports of Felixstowe, Ipswich, we've now got a number of these pop-up container sites which have just opened in green fields, because the ports of Felixstowe and Ipswich are completely congested. They're log-jammed with containers that can't move. Now, if the port is full of empty containers, you can't debark ships. So if you can't disembark the ships with the goods, then the goods won't flow through into the supply chain, which is why we've now seen a number of sites in East Anglia which have actually taken up this kind of almost morbid art installations, reminding us of the global supply chain crisis. But of course, it's not just on business that we can see that the COVID has had a big impact. It's also too on us as consumers. And lots of pinch points in the system. Remember back to October last year, and we were all frantically trying to fill up our cars with fuel before we ran out. We could see and experience in real terms the effect of a supply chain crisis on fuel. But it wasn't just fuel. If you think back, it was building materials, it was Christmas goods, it was certain kind of foodstuffs. We've got used to shortages once again in the last 12 months, something which a generation ago would only have been applicable in a time of war. But recently, shortages have become part of our psyche too. So we've been shopping in bulk, storing, buying ahead, as would evidence this year by the Christmas figures. People were buying earlier in October and November. The Christmas rush that we would normally have in December never happened for many retailers. But perhaps where COVID has made its worst damage is to brands. This time last week, into my inbox, and I'm sure for many more people, became a message from the new CEO of British Airways. Now, British Airways, like many travel companies, has been affected very badly over the pandemic, and not just in terms of loss of revenue. They've also had a considerable loss of faith and trust in its brand. Initially, whilst being one of the first to have a positive response and offer future travel vouchers for people who already have booked trips in the system, they were quick off the mark. But if people didn't want to rebook or to take a future travel voucher and their flight was cancelled, they would have had by law the automatic right to refund. But British Airways, along with Virgin Atlantic, along with Ryanair and many other global airlines, really dragged their feet in terms of doing the right thing for consumers and being quick to respond to refunds. Now, of course, all of that played out almost in the courts last year when British Airways were compelled by the regulator to actually comply with consumer law and actually give people refunds within 7 days. Policies are updated, etc., etc. But of course, in that intervening period, along with all the other kind of disruption that consumers and travellers were facing, not just with British Airways, but across the piece, trust was eroded. Now, the new CEO, along with many other people in the airline industry, recognises that if we're going to get people back into the skies again, there's a lot of work to be done. Some things were introduced across the pandemic, which were measures which were made just to make travel easier and safer. Practicalities, for example, such as not offering in-flight food, but giving people free snacks, water, and perhaps a snack box. Curiously, something that they'd done pre-pandemic before they then took that away and introduced chargeable snacks through their partnership with Marks & Spencer's. In their first and premium lounges, because visitor numbers were so dramatically down, food waste was going to be incredibly high by having an open-style buffet. So they introduced table service, giving people a secure meal, ordered, cooked fresh for them, cutting down food waste and making sure that the consumer had a safe travelling experience whilst dining in their lounges. Now, this has proved tremendously popular with British Airways, and it's part of the raft of measures which the new CEO has recognised post-COVID. These are some of the things we're going to need to do to rebuild trust. More snacks, better service, more compliance, still giving people an outstanding experience, which perhaps has slipped over the last 18 months. And they're one of a number of companies in the travel industry that are looking very seriously now at how they rebuild back their reputations. It's not just travel, of course, it's been affected by COVID and damage to their brand. Many retailers have suffered difficulties too. And that is now the job of work which brands are having to do to really rebuild confidence. So when we think about rebooting retail, what are some of the key trends which consumers are really still in their heads, the things that you as retailers might want to take on board in how you purchase products, deliver services, and give them an experience in store which will be meaningful? Now, of course, for all of us, we spent a considerable amount of time last year at home. 1 second, please. Considerable amount of time at home. Time to think and time to reflect, time to watch the news, time to read. And of course, during this time, we all became very heightened in our awareness of the challenges facing the world. Global warming, COP26, extreme weather events. These things were very graphic on television and, of course, across all of the news channels. You couldn't pick up a book or read a magazine without seeing the impact of our changing world. Pre-COVID, we were all just starting to get familiar with refill stations, reducing plastic waste, increasing our recycling. But during COVID, that time to think really gave people more time for reflection, and a reflection in terms of the way that they were living their lives, and especially their lives as consumers. Now, this fabulous image is both, incredible and very unsettling, I think, at the same time. It's actually from an art installation in Portugal, and it's really, for me, I kind of sum it up as almost a fisheye view. From the floor, as you look up, and you can see, in terms of the amount of plastic waste and debris that's there in the netting suspended above. It's macabre, it's worrying, it's real. All of those items are recovered from the beaches in the Algarve in Portugal. And it represents a very, very kind of moment for us to stop and think about our impact on our world. But of course, it's not just those kind of graphic examples that we can see and those cues which are happening in the media. It's also about brands rebooting their conversations with us and changing the nature of their business and how they want us to consume from them.
If you ever find yourself worried about our planet or your health, start with dinner. Dinner? Indeed. Because one plate made up of raw fruit and veg isn't just better for you, it's better for the planet too. How wonderfully convenient. So, grab your plate and start making a difference. With 1 carrot, 1 cauliflower, 1 pea pesto pasta, 1 beetroot burger, 1 spoon, 1 fork, 1 bowl, 1 dish.
Get the plate!
1 that. 1. Let's eat like the world depends on it. 1 plate at a time. Sainsbury's, helping everyone eat better.
If you haven't noticed the recent change in advertising from Sainsbury's since May 2021, it's all been about doing things differently. Sainsbury's, as we're very familiar with, went through a troubled period most recently in its failed merger with Asda. During that time, a lot of consumers lost confidence in Sainsbury's. The brand actually had some negative advertising and also indexed internally with their own market research as consumers losing some faith and confidence in the Sainsbury's brand. That has resulted in Sainsbury's having a completely new approach and conversation with its consumers and actually getting back to its core business. But not just core business in terms of the way that it used to do things, but getting people to think about eating differently, buying differently, and having a different relationship with food. Now, you may or may not have noticed, but all of the advertising that Sainsbury's have done in the last few months have all been about trying to stimulate our consciousness around vegetables, better eating, meat reduction, energy efficiency, and plastic reduction. In other words, to do the right things. But of course, it's not just Sainsbury's which are recognising that these are some of the biggest challenges of our age. All businesses now understand that to comply with their targets for global warming and all of the different restrictions that they have in terms of shareholders, governmental, and also to their own employees and their engagement, they have to make conscious changes in terms of the way that they do business. Now, when we think about rebooting retail, it's not just the advertising message that needs to change. It's also physically how we get people to shop. And of course, over the last 18 months, we've all had some real big choices there. We could either go to our normal shops because they were open as an essential retailer, or if those shops were closed, we had to shop online. And therefore, I guess it's no surprise that for the majority of purchases made in the last 18 months, couriers and parcels and doorstep deliverers and apps have really seen their ascendancy. It's forecast that in 2020, 87% of households used e-commerce to shop online instead of going and visiting stores. Now that equated to an amazing 826 billion hours of time which was used by people online. Let me just correct that. 82 billion hours of UK shopper time online. Here in the UK, our online spending activity represented 14.5% of global sales, one of the highest percentages country-wise of any country, any single country shopping online. In fact, we were the third biggest in terms of online market share. But of course, it's not just shopping online which has changed. It's also the nature of the brands and who is now selling what. Partly as a result of people like Amazon and their marketplace approach, you now have brands like John Lewis and Next, and even M&S, now selling third-party brands very extensively for the first time. Marks & Spencer's actually quoting their new marketplace approach as being one of the big changes which is helping to shore up its general merchandise business by encouraging brands to shop, encouraging consumers to shop third-party brands whilst on their own site. And of course, that can be a good thing because for Marks & Spencer's, it's bringing additional sales. But for the brands, there's also some points to be concerned about. If you're sharing your marketplace with another brand, you need to make sure that that brand is reputable, gives great service, and has also got a really good relationship with its customers. Because through association, if it's a negative experience, it could damage your brand too. But certainly for Marks & Spencer, the experience seems to be positive, and therefore the marketplace approach is here to stay. But of course, online isn't just about boxes. It's increasingly about how cities are suffering. Retail parks, convenience stores, and local stores all boomed during the pandemic. Why? Because they were safer or perceived as safer places to shop. Small, independent and local, without crowds, no need for great big aspects of social distancing, from people that you knew and trust, was how consumers felt confident to continue shopping locally. And of course, when we were able to venture back out into bigger retail settings, we didn't want to use public transport. So it's no wonder that retail parks, where we could use our own cars and park with distance to one another, were then seen as places where we feel more comfortable and confident to shop. Now, all of this means that our big city centres are still massively challenged. Only in the last couple of weeks have we been able to return back to work. That now means that there's more people migrating back to the offices. That too will eventually have a positive impact for those city centre stores. But for any of you that's got an association with city centre business, those stores and sites will still remain challenged for months, if not years to come. And many brands are still seriously considering closing or removing their space. Only in the last couple of weeks have we seen House of Fraser exit Oxford Street. That now leaves Debenhams from Oxford Street gone, House of Fraser gone. In the next couple of years, Marks & Spencer will close its Marble Arch store to demolish it and rebuild it as a much smaller 3-floor store rather than 6. This is a quantum reduction in retail space on Oxford Street, which was once the UK's premium shopping destination. Now, of course, we've got something to look forward to in June this year. You know, the Queen is going to be having a fantastic 4-day bank holiday for us, and maybe we can use that as an opportunity to bring out the bunting, bring out the flags, and this will be an opportunity to revive Regent Street. But the big question remains, what are we going to do in between all those other days of the year where it's not a bank holiday? You know, where we can't rely on the fact that we're using additional footfall to bring people in because there's a party or there's a celebration or some kind of special event that's going on. And that's where cities are going to have to think about what do we do to reinvent ourselves, to create a point of specialism, destination, safety, and give a distinctiveness to the retail offer that you can't get locally or online. Even when all of that's done, one of the big accounting firms, KPMG, still estimate that by 2025 in the UK, we'll have a 50% reduction in retail space from what we have now. That is a huge consequence to the high street. Digital, as we know, has been massive. And of course, Amazon has made great gains during this time. As a company, Amazon made $386 billion last year. That's a 38% increase in terms of its sales, or an 84% net profit increase. They've introduced many firsts into the market: Prime, Kindle, Alexa, the Marketplace, and Amazon Web Services, which now actually host many, many, many people's websites independently of having anything to do with Amazon. As a result of the pandemic last year and Amazon's incredible growth, they now run their own fleet of 85 767 jets to move goods around the world as aircraft freight carriers. Last year, they placed an order for 100,000 custom-built e-vehicles to replace any of their combustion engine vehicles which are on the roads. Incredible numbers we're looking at here. A business which is transforming itself to become net zero by 2040. But they don't just want our online sales, they also now increasingly want our retail sales too. Very recently, opening Amazon Fresh. First in the USA, where they tested the model, and now here in London and moving out of London this year. This pioneered for the first time what they call just walk out technology. Linked to your smartphone and an app, by cameras in store, as you move through the store and put things into your basket or bag, they will know exactly what you're shopping. As you leave the turnstiles on the end and go back out onto the pavement, you'll get a receipt that comes automatically into your inbox and your credit card will be debited. This is pioneering technology which could be transformative and disruptive to the whole grocery industry. So much so, everybody wants a piece of the action. In fact, Aldi opened their own first digital just walkout store in Greenwich in January of this year, a similar kind of technology to Amazon, but on their own platform. It means if the discounters are taking this seriously and that they see the investment here and the opportunity for customers to have an easier, more frictionless journey, not only might it help them ultimately save costs, fewer colleagues on the floor, less tills, more convenience, 24-hour shopping, you get the idea. It basically means that there's a model here that isn't reliant on people who might go sick, who might require holiday time, time off work, etc., etc. A very different kind of model in the future with a strong brand powered by technology. Now, I mentioned that I went to Chile just before we went into lockdown in the UK, and I went specifically with the Retail Exchange to go and talk to Falabella. They are South America's largest department store retailer, operating in Peru, Argentina, Bolivia, Colombia, etc. Here in Chile, in Santiago, they are revolutionizing their relationships with customers. They still absolutely believe that department store has a role, but it must change. It's a showcase, it's a place for inspiration, a place to shop, but also, importantly, a place for fulfillment. So now if you order something at home on a Falabella website, you can come in store, register as you can see there on the left-hand image, and put in your QR code or tap in your order number. And this is what you then do. So you go to the module. There's a dedicated area. And within 30 seconds, your parcel will be auto-fulfilled. The family aren't just curious, they're smiling, they're happy, they were laughing about the experience, they had fun. It's an example of how brands are using technology to really make omnichannel a very real thing. Order at home, collect in store, have fun throughout the process. Now, when we think about having fun, this is all about the experience. Now, I show that slide with some trepidation. I have to say, we bought a puppy like many people in lockdown. God, that dog can't half keep you awake. For the last 18 months, I think we've been traumatized by this puppy who has been literally disrupting every aspect of our household. Having said that, we can see here the joy that a puppy can bring. But it's about real experiences. This is not life on a screen or click and collect, any of that stuff. This is about getting out into the park, throwing the frisbee, getting your handle, clothing bitten, whatever it takes. But the dog and you are having fun. And we as consumers are all ready to have fun again. Yeah, we love the frictionless, contactless, box at the door, credit card receipt in our inbox. It's nice and easy. But there's so much latent experience that we're wanting. It's no wonder that people like Selfridges are absolutely winning out. Now, anybody who visited Selfridges pre-Christmas this year will know that once again they operated their market, Selfridges Christmas market, in the Duke Street Mews, which was behind the store. Here there was food trucks, brand activations, pop-ups, and lots of things that you could do, all based around a fairground model. The helter-skelter here being an irresistible thing for many shoppers. But in store, Selfridges absolutely nailed it. 45 seconds of joy for those customers, for sure. Positioned near to the escalators on the second floor, you can see the fun that people were having with the dancing Christmas trees. But it wasn't just there. In the basement, there was a series of gospel singers. On another floor, there was a quartet. On another floor, there was a trio singing carols. Now, contrast that with the very same day, my visit to John Lewis on Oxford Street, where up high on one of the escalator atriums was a soloist with a boombox and a violin and a box of Quality Street. Gosh, she cut a tragic figure. If you're going to get behind experience, you have to do it with conviction. Half-hearted does not cut it. And that's why Selfridges have continued to win Best Global Department Store for the 4th year running. When we think about experience, it's really about having relevance to what your consumer is all about. Now, I don't know how many people here remember the Avon brand, but Avon is a direct-to-consumer cosmetics company, founded in 1886, but changed its name to Avon in 1939. Incredibly, it trades from over 100 countries, and Brazil is its biggest market. So much so that in 2020 it was purchased by one of the world's biggest cosmetics conglomerates, Natura, who also now own The Body Shop and Aesop. Now, Avon's model was pioneered on door-to-door. Catalogues, party plan, a representative would come to the door with their famous catchphrase, Avon calling. But of course, time moves on. The millennials of today are unfamiliar with that model. They're shopping online. They're looking at hip beauty brands, which are selling different kinds of things in different ways. So much so that Avon had been losing market share since 2014. When Avon was sold in 2020, it was already on a recovery plan. And a recovery plan which would see it completely revitalise its business. Recognising that it had to compete with big cosmetics houses and on similar terms. This is one of the first of a network of proposed Avon beauty centres. And this is Avon 1886 in Los Angeles. What's really interesting about this, it's a place for consumers. You can just literally walk in and learn about and buy Avon products. But most importantly, it's for its reps. It's a place to train, to be educated, to learn about the products and to learn about business. In other words, what Avon has done is backed its commitment to its own future by saying that we need to transform, and part of that commitment is giving you a place where you can learn and be revitalised and learn everything you need to do to make the brand successful. That's all about having relevancy. Now, I mentioned that Selfridges was the 4th year awarded Global Best Department Store, but it has some strong challenges. This is a new department store that opened just in 2019 in New York City, and it's called Showfields. The idea with Showfields is it brings normally direct-to-consumer only brands into the offline retail environment. Through a 4th floor store, 14,000 square feet, it received $9 million in seed funding. Only last year, it opened a co-working space on the 4th floor, which is about bringing people together, almost like a WeWork concept. But what Showfields aim to do is something that no other department store aims to do, and that's to be the most interesting store in the world. A really bold claim. But across those 4 floors, what we can see is lots and lots of small spaces, all with very, very small brand capsules. Each of those highly curated and done in a way which promotes confidence in terms of their e-commerce, their curation, and also their overall consumer experience. I mentioned before Falabella. They aren't just digitizing how you collect a parcel, but they're digitizing departments. Anybody who sells furniture knows how much space it takes in store and how slow those sales can be. You also have all the inherent problems of having the right model in stock for people to try, or getting rid of display models that have been damaged and soiled at the end of season. So now in their digital furniture showroom, which is 1/10 of the space before, you literally use it almost as a series of big iPads. A design center, specialist expertise, all of the swatches and samples on stock. They will even bring to your door small items of furniture to your own home so that you can test it out, whether it's an armchair, casual tables, dining tables, those kinds of things, so you can sample it in your own home. What have they done with the rest of the furniture floor? Well, one of the biggest trends in South America is these co-working spaces. So they've transformed the former furniture store floors into spaces where young startups, people who can't yet afford office space, are actually now able to come together and rent out either a boardroom, as you can see in the bottom there, or a meeting space with hospitality, refreshments, all of the tech gear that you would expect to need in there, or just free issue space where you can sit in and come and surf the internet and do business casually. In other words, it's about reinventing their models. What this presentation has all been about is about business as unusual. So as companies reopen and restart and re-engage and rebuild, they don't just open the doors again and just think it's about doing what they did before. It's about stopping and thinking, what do we need to do, what do we do best, and what do we need to do more of? Now, we're in the kind of situation at home where we are planning a kitchen refurbishment. We've been planning it for 2 years, really, and it's about time we got on with it. So, charged with some ideas in mind, we went online and had a look at what John Lewis had to offer by way of kitchens. We live partly between the Norwich store and Ipswich store, and we thought, well, you know, it's a toss-up. Which store do we go and have a look in store? We thought we'll do the right thing. We'll go online and see which has got big kitchen departments, see if they could help us. Not enough information. So we thought we'll call the store and actually find out which has got the best kitchen department. After 40 minutes on hold, being told how important my call was, we gave up and thought, you know what, sod it, just get in the car, we'll have an afternoon out, take potluck, and we went to Ipswich. And this is John Lewis at home in Ipswich. What I can only describe there is an incredibly disappointing experience. Not only was there no kitchens in store, there were no brochures, no help, no service, no awareness from any of the team members, of which we spoke to 11 partners for advice. Ultimately finding somebody who could repoint us to the same website that we'd looked to at home. There was no point. Now, the thing which is really quite incredible in all of this, John Lewis have got a really good range of kitchens. They also make a fantastic glossy brochure with all of the details in there. Now, had we have picked differently and gone to the Norwich store, we'd have been able to find all of those kitchen displays. We just hit unlucky. But the point here is kitchens home design, home installation, and in fact, anything to do with made-to-measure for John Lewis is the most profitable part of its business. And kitchens is a real standout in terms of the amount of money it makes per transaction. But if you run a range of department stores, surely, and one that's called John Lewis at Home, would you not think there'd be some reference to kitchens? A small display, a metre wide, a brochure stand, a TV running the same video that's online. Bonkers. What does Build Back Better mean? Well, in the instance of John Lewis and our kitchen departments, it means that if this is such an important part of our business and it's so profitable, and we've even gone in terms of our partnership plan and saying we're less interested in fashion and much more interested in home, then we need to be thinking about actually how do we maximise the exposure of kitchens everywhere and get all of our partners on board in terms of selling this, because it could be really good for us. But of course, for every retail business, it means doing things differently, and that's where we really need pioneers. People who are prepared to stop and think and rip up the rule book so that they can give something new to consumers. We've seen it in Showfields, but also we see it in a whole range of British businesses over the years that have done things differently. Dyson rewrote the rules on home engineering. And look at these guys. This is a fantastic company called Let Us Grow. Started in 2015 and based in Bristol. They are pioneers in terms of farming, vertical and urban farming. They've won countless awards for their patent-pending technology in tech, bio, and business. As we'll all be encouraged to eat more plants to reduce our dependence on meat, you can see that the growth in businesses which are supporting alternatives is going to be huge. Through their patented aeroponics technology, which essentially means no soil, companies like Let Us Grow are changing the way that we will eat in future. Their container farms, though, can be brought into schools, into homes, into housing developments, into restaurants and into stores, transforming the consumer experience, giving excitement and newness, and really something very interesting and different for customers. And that's what Futurview is all about. As a company, we're working with brands to help them see their own new bright future. It's about adding value and amplifying what they already do, or it's about creating value to get them to do more. In simple terms, it means don't just deliver, but excel at what you do. Be your brand's best self. For John Lewis, that might mean putting kitchen pop-ups or showrooms or even bite-size into every John Lewis department store. And then people will know what's to buy. Quite simply, you can't sell what the consumer can't see. But for every business, it's about looking deep into yourselves and saying, where could we improve? What could we do more? But where you create value is where you take a great brand and extend it. And you really then start to think about what's the potential where we can go further. If you look at a great British company, another pioneer and innovator like Hotel Chocolat, you can see how that they, through a culture of innovation, continue to grow. They had ice cream. They had outdoor experiences through the Chocmobile. And I'm sure everybody's seen the recent TV advertising for the Velvetizer, where they have been transforming people's understanding of how you make fantastic drinking chocolate at home. All of this at the expense of people like Thornton's, who've exited the high street, and people like Cadbury's, who, as good as it is, still don't really capitalise on how great their brand could be on the high streets. Perfect if you want to go to Bourneville, but what about a Cadbury's experience regionally? Futurview, you can see us online. Go to futurview.co.uk. If you're somebody who's interested in looking at how your business can be transformed with new ideas, innovation, challenging you to think differently, literally getting you to go and look at places where you can grow, then come and talk to us. We'd love to talk to you. Whether that's through trends, research, insight, and analysis, we'll give you solutions that will help you. Our business is all about giving people clear purpose, giving them perfection in terms of their execution, and the quality that will drive through the performance. It's one of a number of businesses I run. The other one, you can see us in a stand just behind here in this theatre as you exit, called the Retail Exchange. It's an online podcast. It's all for retailers, and it's all about sharing best practices. We've partnered with Spring Fair this year, and there will be 8 episodes that will air following this event at the NEC, the first of which is online now, featuring Simon Moriarty from Mintel, who will give you a lot more background in terms of trends. But do look at the Retail Exchange. You'll find that it's a fascinating podcast. I listen to it in the car, actually, and it's great to listen back to other episodes, especially ones where I've not been involved. I hope you found today interesting. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take a couple of questions from the floor. Thank you.
We've got time for one quick question. If anyone wants to ask it, be brave. I'm sure Carl's going to be knocking about anyway, but if you want to grab him personally. But apart from that, oh, we got one, Carl.
Hello. Thank you so much for sharing. What do you think the impact is on small retail? One store in one city. A lot of your presentation was about how big companies change. I'm curious what's happening on the other side of the spectrum.
I sum it up in one word, really. It's all about focus. For small retailers, it's even more important that you have a distinct point of view. Really zone in on who is my customer. What might that particular customer be looking for? And take on board some of what I've shared there around that whole change in consciousness. But then think about your product range. What are we selling which is specifically right for this customer? Edit your ranges, be hard and be ruthless, and then get behind the things that you've got, and then just give unparalleled service. So I think it's not about spread betting. This is about really picking the winners and having an absolute distinctive focus, then for the execution and the quality of service to see you through.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Big round of applause for Carl, then, please.